In the next 10 minutes, a young, ambitious manager is going to fire an elderly black engineer for being outdated, a decision that will feel like a triumph of modern efficiency. What he doesn't know is that the old man he's about to discard isn't just an employee, he's the silent, invisible founder of the entire corporation, and the business card he's about to be handed will detonate his career and expose a truth that has been hiding in plain sight for 40 years. Deep within the gleaming, hypermodern campus of Viridian Dynamics, past the kombucha taps and the brightly colored collaboration pods, was a small, quiet laboratory that felt like a relic from another time. This was the domain of Mr. James Albright, a senior engineer in the quality assurance department and, at 68, a man who moved with the patient, meticulous grace of a watchmaker. His lab was an analog sanctuary in a digital world. While the rest of the company chased agile sprints and cloud-based solutions, Mr. Albright worked with equipment that hummed with the steady, reassuring weight of old transformers. A vintage Tektronix oscilloscope, its green line dancing with hypnotic calm, occupied the center of his workbench. He didn't rely on automated diagnostic software. He relied on his hands, his eyes, and a lifetime of experience that allowed him to feel a microscopic flaw in a polymer blend or hear an imperceptible harmonic dissonance in a vibrating motor. His greatest tool was a worn leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with decades of handwritten logs, elegant schematics, and observations penned in a precise, neat script. He was a craftsman, the last of his kind, known for catching catastrophic failures no algorithm could predict. The veteran engineers, the ones who had been there long enough to remember the company's early struggles, revered him as a living legend. They knew that Mr. Albright was the company's ultimate fail-safe, the final human check against the hubris of modern engineering. To the new hires, however, fresh out of university and fluent in code, he was a strange, inefficient enigma, a relic to be politely ignored on their way to the next stand-up meeting. They saw his analog methods not as precise but as slow, his handwritten logs not as detailed but as archaic. They couldn't comprehend why the company still paid a man to do a job that, in their view, could be better and more quickly done by a piece of software. It's a conflict playing out in workplaces all over the world, the relentless push for new methods versus the irreplaceable value of hands-on experience. We'd love to get a sense of the world you work in. Let us know in the comments what your occupation is and where you're watching from. It's always incredible to see the diverse fields and expertise represented in this community, where the quiet, invaluable craftsmanship of people like Mr. Albright is truly appreciated. He was, in essence, the soul of the company's promise of quality, a silent guardian ensuring that the things they built were not just new, but worthy of the name Viridian, a promise he had made to himself and to the world a very long time ago. The quiet, meticulous world of James Albright was about to be invaded by a hurricane of ambition named Marcus Thorne. As the new vice president of product development, Marcus was the physical embodiment of the move fast and break things philosophy, a charismatic and ruthless architect of what he called progress. He had been brought in to shatter the company's established rhythms, to inject a Silicon Valley metabolism into the steady, beating heart of Viridian Dynamics. He spoke in a rapid-fire dialect of corporate buzzwords, evangelizing the virtues of agile sprints, disruptive innovation, and data-driven decision-making. To Marcus, if something couldn't be measured, automated, or optimized by an algorithm, it was not only useless but actively harmful, a drag on the company's velocity. He saw tradition as stagnation and experience as a liability. His Bible was the dashboard, his God was the growth chart, and his apostles were the young, hungry software engineers who shared his disdain for anything that couldn't be accomplished in a 2-week sprint. From his first day, he viewed the quality assurance lab and specifically Mr. Albright's analog corner with a special kind of contempt. It was, in his eyes, a dusty museum of inefficiency, a costly bottleneck staffed by a relic from a bygone era. He couldn't comprehend why a company with cutting-edge manufacturing capabilities still relied on a man with an oscilloscope and a handwritten notebook. He would walk past the lab, his lip curling slightly as he saw Mr. Albright patiently calibrating a machine, and see not a craftsman at work, but a wasted salary, a human-shaped cog that was slowing down his perfectly designed machine. He made it his personal mission to bring what he called the 21st century to Viridian's QA process. He began building a case, presenting elegant charts to the executive team that showed the potential cost savings and speed enhancements of a fully automated software suite he proposed to license. He promised a system that would be faster, cheaper, and more reliable than any human could ever be, completely eliminating the need for what he derisively called artisanal testing. He saw Mr. Albright not as a person with unique, irreplaceable skills, but as the final boss in his quest to purge the company of its past, the ultimate symbol of the old way of thinking that he was determined to burn to the ground. His campaign was not just about upgrading technology, it was an ideological crusade to replace the company's foundational principle of meticulous quality with his own gospel of relentless, unapologetic speed. The collision was inevitable, a clash of philosophies scheduled for a sterile Tuesday morning meeting. Marcus Thorne, with the triumphant air of a conquering general, officially unveiled the centerpiece of his new regime, ViridiaScan, a state-of-the-art, fully automated quality assurance software suite. He presented it as the company's salvation, a sleek, intelligent system that would replace the slow, fallible and expensive human element of testing. In his demonstration, the software's interface was a beautiful tapestry of real-time data visualizations and predictive analytics, promising to do in minutes what the old lab took days to accomplish. It was a world away from Mr. Albright's quiet sanctuary of analog dials and handwritten notes. The meeting was a victory lap for Marcus, and he basked in the admiring nods of the younger engineers. But as he opened the floor for questions, a quiet, steady voice emerged from the back of the room. It was Mr. Albright. He stood, not with aggression, but with the calm authority of a man who knows his subject intimately. He praised the software's speed and its ability to detect surface-level imperfections, a diplomatic opening that made his subsequent warning all the more powerful. However, Mr. Albright continued, his voice even, I have a concern about its capacity to detect material fatigue under conditions of sustained harmonic resonance. A few of the younger engineers exchanged blank stares, but the veterans in the room stiffened, recognizing the deep, almost existential threat those words represented for a company that built high-performance components. Mr. Albright explained that while the ViridiaScan was excellent at static analysis, it had a critical blind spot. It couldn't replicate the slow, subtle degradation of materials when subjected to specific, persistent vibrations over time, the kind of stress that causes catastrophic failure in engines, aircraft, and medical equipment months or years after they leave the factory. He described how he could see this phenomenon on his old oscilloscope, a subtle decay in the waveform's return signal that was invisible to digital sensors but screamed metal fatigue to his experienced eye. This wasn't a flaw in the product, it was a flaw in the universe, and only a human who knew how to listen for it could catch it. Marcus listened with a patient, condescending smile plastered on his face. When Mr. Albright finished, he didn't address the technical concern. He attacked the source. Thank you, James, for that anecdotal perspective, Marcus said, his tone dripping with dismissive patronage. What we need to remember is that ViridiaScan has been tested against millions of data points. We can't allow our progress to be held hostage by corner cases or a resistance to change. He framed Mr. Albright's decades of irreplaceable experience as a failure to integrate with new, superior systems. The data, Marcus concluded, tapping his tablet with a flourish, is unequivocal. We have to trust the system, not our gut feelings. We are moving forward. The dismissal was absolute, a public declaration that the old ways were dead. The collision course was set, and Marcus now saw clearly that for his vision of the future to be fully realized, the last living relic of the past had to be removed. Having been publicly challenged, however gently, Marcus Thorne's mission evolved from simple modernization to a personal vendetta. The quiet dignity of Mr. Albright's warning was not seen as a helpful insight from a seasoned expert, but as a direct threat to his authority and his vision. He knew he couldn't fire a man simply for being right, so he embarked on a quiet and insidious campaign to build a case that would be unassailable in the cold, impersonal court of human resources. He began to meticulously document what he framed as Mr. Albright's failure to integrate. He would send company-wide emails praising the adoption rates of the new ViridiaScan software, deliberately CSNG senior executives, while attaching reports that showed one conspicuous outlier, James Albright, whose usage rate was 0. He created a digital paper trail designed to paint a picture of a stubborn Luddite employee who was actively resisting progress. While Mr. Albright was painstakingly running a new component through a multi-day stress test on his oscilloscope, listening for the subtle harmonic dissonance that could lead to catastrophic failure in the field, Marcus would be documenting this activity as engaging in redundant, non-sanctioned testing protocols and a willful disregard for standardized procedure. He twisted the very essence of Mr. Albright's value, his meticulous, irreplaceable diligence, and reframed it as insubordination. He scheduled weekly progress meetings with Mr. Albright, which were less about progress and more about creating a documented record of his supposed failures. In these meetings, Marcus would ask pointed, leading questions like, "James, can you show me the output from ViridiaScan for this week's tests?" Knowing full well that Mr. Albright had been using his own trusted analog methods. When Mr. Albright would try to explain the unique value of his tests, Marcus would cut him off with a patient smile and say, "I understand, but the entire team is aligned with the new system. We can't have individuals operating outside the established workflow. It creates inconsistencies." Each of these interactions was carefully summarized in follow-up emails to HR, building a narrative, brick by brick, of an employee who was not a team player and was actively undermining the company's strategic initiatives. He was building a fortress of data, a seemingly objective case built on software reports, email chains, and meeting minutes, all of which completely ignored the one metric that mattered: the fact that Mr. Albright was the only thing standing between Viridian Dynamics and a potential product recall that could bankrupt the company. The trap was meticulously set, the data-driven justification was complete, and Marcus felt the smug satisfaction of a man who knows he has cornered his prey with logic and process, entirely convinced he was acting in the best interest of the company by cutting away its supposedly weakest link. The summons came not as a surprise, but as the inevitable conclusion to Marcus Thorne's calculated campaign. Mr. Albright was called into Marcus's office late on a Friday afternoon, a time chosen for maximum corporate cruelty, ensuring the victim would carry the wound through the weekend. The office itself was a testament to Marcus's philosophy, a minimalist cube of glass and brushed steel that offered no privacy, designed to put his own importance on constant display. The meeting was, by design, a piece of public theater. As Mr. Albright walked calmly into the glass box, every employee in the surrounding open-plan workspace immediately knew what was happening. They lowered their heads, pretending to be engrossed in their work, but their eyes darted towards the unfolding drama, their screens reflecting the silent, slow-motion execution. Marcus, sitting behind a vast, empty desk, gestured for Mr. Albright to take a seat, the picture of managerial magnanimity. He began his speech, a pre-rehearsed monologue delivered with an air of somber finality that was utterly betrayed by the triumphant glint in his eyes. He spoke of the company's exciting new trajectory, of the need for agility and forward-thinking paradigms in a rapidly evolving marketplace. He used phrases like structural realignment and resource optimization to create a sterile, impersonal buffer around the brutal act he was about to commit. "As you know, James," Marcus said, his voice smooth and practiced, "we are fundamentally shifting our processes toward a more data-centric model. The ViridiaScan suite has revolutionized our quality assurance capabilities, allowing us to be faster, more efficient, and more responsive to market demands." He steepled his fingers, looking at Mr. Albright with a look of feigned pity. "In this new environment, certain legacy roles, while valuable in their time, have unfortunately become redundant. The manual oversight and analog testing you've championed are simply not aligned with the velocity required for our future growth." He slid a neat, leather-bound folder across the polished surface of the desk. "The company is moving in a new direction," he said, the words landing with the cold, sterile weight of a surgeon's scalpel. "And as a result, your role within the organization has been eliminated. We've put together a standard severance package to help with your transition." He officially terminated the employment of a man who had dedicated over 40 years of his life to the company, not with a roar, but with a quiet, devastating hum of corporate jargon. Mr. Albright sat perfectly still, absorbing the cold, rehearsed speech without a flicker of emotion, his quiet dignity serving as a stark, silent rebuke to the smug, performative finality of the man sitting across from him. Outside the glass walls, the department held its collective breath, witnessing the culmination of Marcus's ruthless vision, the triumphant purging of the past, executed in full view of the present. Throughout the entirety of Marcus Thorne's sterile, prepackaged speech, Mr. Albright remained utterly still, a portrait of serene composure. He did not interrupt, he did not argue, and his expression betrayed no hint of the anger or fear that Marcus had clearly expected. He simply listened, his hands resting calmly in his lap, absorbing the torrent of corporate euphemisms with the patient forbearance of a man who has weathered far worse storms than a young manager's inflated ego. His silence was not one of weakness or defeat, it was the quiet, profound silence of observation, the silence of a man watching a predictable and tragic series of events unfold exactly as he knew they would. When Marcus finished his monologue and slid the leather-bound severance folder across the vast, empty expanse of the desk, Mr. Albright finally moved. He leaned forward slightly and looked down at the folder, his gaze lingering on the embossed Viridian Dynamics logo. He did not open it. He did not need to. He knew what was inside, a collection of carefully worded legal documents designed to sever a lifetime of dedication as cleanly and impersonally as possible. He raised his head and looked at Marcus, and for the first time, a flicker of emotion crossed his face. It was not anger or resentment. It was a deep, palpable sadness. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, a quiet acknowledgement not of his own termination, but of what Marcus had just done to the soul of the company. It was a nod of mourning for the principles being discarded. Then, with a slow, deliberate grace that stood in stark contrast to the frantic high-velocity world Marcus was trying to build, Mr. Albright reached into the inner pocket of his simple, well-worn blazer. The entire office, watching through the glass walls, seemed to lean in, their collective breath held in suspense. Marcus watched, a flicker of annoyance on his face, assuming the old man was reaching for a pen to sign the papers to surrender. But what emerged was not a pen. It was a single business card, held gently between his thumb and forefinger. It was thick, heavy cardstock, a creamy off-white, with no glossy finish or ostentatious design. It was the epitome of understated elegance and quiet authority. He did not flick it or toss it across the desk. He leaned forward again and placed it gently on the polished surface, right next to the severance folder. He slid it slowly across the desk until it came to a soft stop directly in front of Marcus. The transaction was complete, a quiet, almost ceremonial exchange. On one side of the desk sat the folder, representing Marcus's new world of cold, impersonal, data-driven decisions. On the other side sat the single, simple card, an artifact from an older world, representing something else entirely. It rested there, a silent, profound challenge, waiting for the smug, triumphant manager to finally look down and read it. Marcus Thorne looked at the simple, elegant card resting on his desk with a flicker of annoyance, followed by a wave of dismissive amusement. He assumed it was a pathetic, last-ditch effort from the old man, a final, defiant gesture. Perhaps it was the business card of some second-rate employment lawyer, a silent, empty threat. A smirk played on his lips as he reached for it, a gesture of condescending indulgence. He would humor the old relic. He picked up the card, surprised by the unexpected weight and texture of the heavy stock. It felt substantial, solid, a stark contrast to the flimsy, glossy cards he was used to. His smirk began to fade, replaced by a flicker of curiosity as he turned it over. The design was minimalist, almost severe in its simplicity. The company name, Viridian Dynamics, was embossed in a classic, deep blue serif font at the top. Below it there was just a name and a title. His eyes fell upon the name first, James Albright. The name itself sent a small, cold jolt through him. It was a common enough name, but it was also the name of the company's almost mythical founder, a figure he had only ever seen in a single grainy photograph in the corporate history archives, a man who had supposedly retired from public life decades ago. He told himself it was a coincidence, an absurdity. He had just fired James Albright, the slow, outdated engineer from the lab. This had to be a different person. But then, his gaze drifted downwards to the single line of text beneath the name, and the entire world tilted on its axis. His brain read the words but refused to process them. They were simple, direct, and utterly impossible. Founder and chairman. The smirk on Marcus's face didn't just disappear, it was violently erased, replaced by a mask of pale, slack-jawed disbelief. The blood drained from his face, a cold, prickling sensation spreading across his skin. His hand, the one holding the card, began to tremble uncontrollably. The office outside his glass walls, the bustling hub of his new efficient empire, seemed to blur and warp, the sounds of keyboards and quiet chatter fading into a dull, distant roar. All he could see, all he could comprehend, were the two words burning on the card in his hand. Founder. Chairman. The man he had just systematically humiliated, hunted, and fired, the man he had derided as a legacy asset and an anecdotal perspective, was not just an employee. He was the genesis of it all. The architect of the entire corporation. The ultimate, unassailable authority. Every smug email, every condescending meeting, every meticulously documented failure to integrate flashed through his mind, each one now transformed from a clever corporate maneuver into an act of catastrophic, career-suicidal arrogance. The data he had worshipped, the metrics he had used to build his case, were all rendered meaningless, a monument to his own spectacular, blinding hubris. He was holding the irrefutable, tangible proof that he had not just made a mistake. He had committed the corporate equivalent of treason against the king he didn't even know was in the room. He looked up slowly, his eyes wide with terror, to meet the calm, steady gaze of the old man sitting across from him, a man who had just been transformed from a redundant relic into the single most powerful person Marcus had ever met. As Marcus Thorne's world crumbled into silent, terrified dust, James Albright's expression remained unchanged. The deep, sorrowful look was still there, the look of a man witnessing a profound, though entirely predictable, failure. He did not gloat. He did not say, "I told you so." He simply watched the young, arrogant VP process the cataclysmic new reality presented by the simple piece of cardstock. When it seemed that Marcus might actually faint, Mr. Albright finally spoke, his voice as calm and steady as the hum of his old oscilloscope. "I founded this company 40 years ago, Mr. Thorne," he began, the words landing not with the force of a thunderclap, but with the quiet, undeniable weight of historical fact. "I founded it in my garage with 2 partners and a single, unshakable principle. We would build things that would not break. Not just products that worked, but products that were so meticulously designed and relentlessly tested that our customers would bet their lives on them." Unbreakable quality wasn't just a marketing slogan, it was a promise. It was the entire soul of this enterprise. He leaned back slightly in his chair, his gaze distant as if looking back through the decades. "About 10 years ago the doctors found something. They told me I needed to slow down, to step away from the stress of running a global corporation day to day. So I did. I handed the title of CEO to Sarah, my most trusted protégé, a brilliant woman who understands the market better than I ever did. The world thought I retired. And in a way I did. I retired from board meetings, from shareholder calls, from the endless parade of spreadsheets and projections." He then leaned forward again, his eyes locking onto Marcus's, the intensity of his gaze pulling the terrified young man back from the brink of total collapse. "But I never retired from my promise," he continued. "I kept my original office, right there in the quality assurance lab, under my old title of senior engineer. I wanted to stay close to the metal, close to the hum of the electricity, close to the things we actually build. I wanted to ensure that no matter how fast this company grew, no matter how much it chased the market, it would never, ever break its foundational promise." His voice was low, patient, the voice of a teacher explaining a fundamental law of the universe. "I am the final quality check, Mr. Thorne. I am the human failsafe. When the algorithms fail, when the software misses what it hasn't been programmed to see, when the obsession with speed leads us to the edge of a cliff, I am the one who is there to pull us back. My job isn't redundant. My job is the only reason Viridian Dynamics has the reputation it has today. It is the only job that truly matters." Having laid the 40-year history of the company bare, exposing the foundational truth that Marcus had so arrogantly dismissed, James Albright did not indulge in a moment of triumph. His work was not yet finished. The expression of sorrow on his face hardened slightly, replaced by a look of grim, quiet resolve. The company had a sickness, and he was the physician who now had to excise the tumor. While Marcus remained frozen behind his desk, a statue of pure terror, Mr. Albright reached into his blazer pocket once more, this time retrieving not a business card, but a simple, modern smartphone. Its screen lit up his face, a stark contrast to the analog world he usually inhabited. His movements were economical and precise. He didn't scroll frantically. His thumb moved to a single contact in his favorites list, a name simply marked Sarah. He pressed the call button and lifted the phone to his ear. It rang only once. The entire office, watching this silent, deadly ballet through the glass walls, seemed to hold its collective breath. They could not hear the voice on the other end, but they didn't need to. Mr. Albright's words were all that mattered. "Sarah, it's James," he said, his voice calm, low, and completely devoid of any agitation. It was the tone of a man reporting a routine status update, which made the content of his message all the more devastating. "We have a situation in the product development division." He paused, listening for a moment, his eyes never leaving the petrified face of Marcus Thorne. "Yes, I'm handling it now. Please ask the entire executive board to meet me in the main conference room in 5 minutes." It was not a request. It was a summons, delivered with the quiet, unquestionable authority of a man who had never truly relinquished his command. The power he wielded was not performative or loud. It was intrinsic, absolute, and instantly obeyed. He listened again for a brief moment, then delivered the final, career-ending blow, his voice remaining perfectly even as if he were ordering office supplies. "And Sarah," he added, "please have security escort Mr. Thorne from the building immediately. His access should be revoked before he reaches the lobby." He didn't need to say more. He didn't need to explain the reasons. The command was the verdict, the sentence, and the execution all in one. He ended the call and placed the phone gently on the desk, its screen going dark. The entire exchange had taken less than 30 seconds. In that time, a rising star vice president had been extinguished, and the entire leadership of a multi-billion-dollar corporation had been summoned by a man they thought was just an old engineer. Marcus finally seemed to understand what was happening, a flicker of comprehension cutting through his shock. His fate was sealed. He had been fired, not with a folder full of paperwork and corporate jargon, but with a quiet phone call that had realigned the entire company. The quiet hum of the office outside suddenly seemed to cease, and in the distance, Marcus could hear the faint, distinct sound of an elevator dinging on their floor, its arrival heralding the end of his world. The main conference room at Viridian Dynamics was a cathedral of modern corporate power, a long, sterile space dominated by a monolithic black marble table and a wall of seamlessly integrated video screens. But today the usual occupants of this space, the company's highest-paid executives and its CEO, Sarah, were not seated in their usual places of authority. They were arranged along the sides of the table, their postures a mixture of apprehension and profound respect, their expensive suits looking oddly out of place in the presence of the man who now sat at its head. James Albright did not look like a chairman reclaiming his throne. He looked like the craftsman he had always been. His simple blazer was draped over the back of his chair, and open before him on the polished marble was not a laptop or a tablet, but his worn, leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with the elegant handwritten script that held more truth than any digital dashboard. He was not gloating. The quiet satisfaction on his face was that of a teacher, not a victor. He was there to save his company from itself. He began to speak, his voice calm and measured as he explained to his executive team, the very people who had championed Marcus Thorne's gospel of speed, the near catastrophe they had averted. He didn't just tell them they were wrong, he showed them. He opened his notebook to a specific page, revealing a hand-drawn waveform that looked like a seismograph reading of a tiny, distant earthquake. This, he said, pointing to a subtle, almost invisible flicker in the green line, is harmonic resonance fatigue in the new TX700 turbine bearing. Our Viridiascan software, for all its speed and processing power, sees this as statistical noise. It's programmed to look for immediate, obvious fractures. But this is a whisper. It's the sound of a crack that won't happen for 6 months. It's the whisper of a jet engine failing at 30,000 feet. The room was utterly silent. He explained how he had run the test for 72 straight hours on his old oscilloscope, patiently watching and listening for that one specific fatal whisper that the company's new multi-million-dollar system was deaf to. He had found it, preventing a product launch that would have inevitably led to a catastrophic recall, lawsuits, and the complete destruction of the Viridian brand. We became so obsessed with moving fast, he continued, his gaze sweeping across the faces of his leadership team, that we forgot why we started moving in the first place. The soul of this company is not in its stock price, or its sprint cycles, or its quarterly growth. It is in a simple, unbreakable promise we made to the world 40 years ago, that anything with our name on it could be trusted with your life. He closed the notebook gently. My presence in that lab was not an oversight. It was the bedrock. I am the guardian of that promise. That is my only job. He was not firing them. He was recalibrating them, reminding them that their greatest innovation was not their technology, but their integrity. He was back in his rightful visible role, a silent founder who had returned to ensure the magnificent machine he had built never lost its soul. If you've made it this far, it's likely because you share that belief, and if you want to continue seeing tales that honor the quiet heroes and timeless values that truly matter in our world, consider subscribing to the channel to ensure you never miss a single one.